Welcome to our video series on Path to Nibbana. This is part 5, and today we'll be discussing what Anithya is. Our mission is to find the path to attain Nibbana. And from our previous videos, we know that there are 4 steps. That is Sowan, Sakrudagami, Anagami, and Arihat. And there are different subjects that we need to master at each stage. The first subject under Sowan was learning to be the best person you can be. The second subject, learning to train your mind to stay focused. In the next video after that, we learned about the concept of Anatma and Sakaya Ditti. And just to recap, we have 2 main parts to us, which is our mind and our body. And the concept of Sakaya Ditti is an illusion that there is a permanent entity called me inside us. And our goal is to eliminate that illusion. We also realized that the concept of the boss called me is really a mental construct that our mind made up, and it's just really an illusion. So what we are trying to do is slowly train our mind to see things as they are. So let's dive deeper and let us look at our body and see what our body is made out of. Let's start with the brain. According to the Buddhist teaching, our brain and all our body parts are made out of 4 elements. I personally like to call them solid components, liquid components, air, and energy, but the correct Pali terms are Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayo. But to me, these make more sense, so I just use these. And one other concept is that although everything in our body has these 4 elements, there'll be one that will be more prominent than the others. Now, from our science knowledge, we know that our whole body, including the brain, is made out of cells. But in the Buddhist teaching, they define and describe something even smaller than molecules and electrons, which science hasn't caught up with yet. But for us to grasp the concept of Anithya, we can just think of cells because that's something we already know. So if you think of the brain, we know the brain is made out of cells, and we also know that cells are born, live for a short time, and die, and then new cells are born to replace them. So we can conclude, number 1, the brain is made out of 4 elements: solid, liquid, air, and energy. We also know that the brain is constantly changing because the cells are dying and new cells are being born. Then we know that really there is nothing permanent in our brain. We also didn't see the boss called me hiding somewhere in our brain. Therefore, we can finally conclude that the boss called me is just an illusion that the mind created. So these are the 5 conclusions we can make. Now let's look at a different part of our body, which will be the face. So you have eyes, nose, mouth and tongue, ears, facial muscles and bones, and the neck. And you can make the same conclusions, which is the face is also made out of the same four elements: solid components, liquid, air, and energy. And then the face is also made out of cells, cells that are dying and new cells are being born all the time. So therefore, the face is also constantly changing. And therefore, there is no permanent entity in the face. We did not see the boss call me hiding somewhere inside our face. And therefore, we can conclude that this boss call me is an illusion that the mind created. Just like that, now next we'll look at the chest and abdomen together and arms and legs again. Same conclusions. Made out of four elements. Because there are cells dying and new cells being born, there's constant change. There is nothing permanent. We didn't see a boss called me hiding somewhere inside our chest or abdomen. And therefore, this boss called me is an illusion that the mind created. Now, let's look at a tree. What do you see there? You see the same four elements. There are solid components, liquid components, air, and energy. Again, I need to emphasize the Pali terms are Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayo. These are terms that I personally prefer because these terms are easier for me to contemplate on. But please feel free to use the Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayu if you prefer. But seriously, we are looking at concepts. So then we look at the trees. They too are made out of cells, cells that are constantly dying and being replaced by new cells. So even a tree has these same properties. Let's look at something like a chair. What do we see? We see solid components, liquid components, air, and energy. And then we know from our science knowledge that everything is made out of atoms, and we know that atoms are constantly changing. Once again, I'd like to remind you that in the Buddhist teaching, they talk of something even smaller than an atom, something that science has not yet figured out. But the concept is what is important, and the concept is that things are constantly changing. And now pause for a second and look at the whole earth. And you suddenly realize that you have the same four elements, which is solid components, liquid components, air, and energy. And then the whole world is made out of atoms, and atoms that are constantly changing. So, whether you look at yourself and look at your body or your mind, or whether you look at a friend and look at their body and their mind, whether you look at a tree, a thing like a chair, or the whole earth, we can make the same conclusions, which is everything is made out of the same four elements: solid components, liquid, air, and energy, and everything is constantly changing. Cells are dying and new cells are being born. Molecules and atoms are constantly changing. So then we conclude that there is really no permanent entity anywhere. And this constant change is called Anithya or impermanence. So now you know the concept of Anithya, and we will have a separate video about dukkha much later. Now, theoretically, everything we talked about makes sense. But you have to contemplate about it because these concepts are new to us, and we have old habits where we think that we have someone called me living inside our body. We look around and everything seems solid and doesn't seem impermanent. So, changing these old habits is not easy, and that's why you have to contemplate frequently. And exactly how do you do this contemplation? That is what we'll discuss in our next video. And the technique is something that was taught by Venerable Mankandawala Sudassana Thero. So today we learned about Anithya, and the next video will be on a simple technique of contemplation, or another word for contemplation is Vipassana meditation. I really want to remind you about a lesson I learned, which is that the amount of knowledge we have is minimal. So it is very, very important to stay humble and to keep learning and contemplating. We need to help each other and nurture each other in this journey. Please do take a moment to join our mailing list at zenexercise.com so that we could share future videos and other resources that we come across. You also have access to the free downloadable books, and these are the 4 that really helped me, and a couple of the Hamdesana and TED Talks that really helped me understand this concept. Thank you for listening, and please do take a moment to share this video with like-minded friends.